This is the intro video for Algebra 1, Section 2.3. And in this video we're going to be looking at percent. Percent is a very common word, but we're going to start off by looking at what it means. So the word percent, in its most literal sense, means per 100. Sometimes people will say out of 100, also a good way of putting it. And so this percent is just a great way of comparing different things to each other. For example, if you took a quiz and I told you that you got a 29, you might be a little concerned. You might think, "Oh man, 29, that's a terrible grade." But what if I finish my sentence by saying you got 29 out of 30? That would actually be a pretty good grade, right? But if I finish my sentence by saying 29%, that carries a whole different meaning because now it would be 29 out of 100. And so we use that word percent often to compare various quantities, and so we want to be really careful that we understand what it means and how it's used. So 81% is currently written in percent form, and we could write it as a decimal. The way that we would write 81% as a decimal is to take the decimal point where it currently is. Right now it's to the right of the 1, and we can move it. Well, let me actually change this a little bit. We can move it 2 places to the left to transform this into the decimal version of 81%. So 81% is the exact same thing as 0.81. The reasoning behind that is pretty simple. We could write it out like this and say 81%, since percent means per 100, we could write that as 81 over 100. And that's equal to 81 hundredths, which is 0.81. So we'll typically skip this step and just jump right over to this one here to convert a percent into a decimal. Another one here, I think, is we're talking about 7% written as a decimal. We are still going to write that. We're still going to be moving the decimal 2 places when we write that as a decimal. So 7% means 7 out of 100. And that would be the same thing as 0.07. So notice I did move the decimal 2 places. I have to have that placeholder of 0 in there in order to make the notation correct. A couple of other things here before we do some examples together. The word of often means multiply. And the word is very often means equals. And so we're going to use these translations to help us go from a pretty simple sentence into a mathematical equation that we can solve. So, as before with any of these videos, if you think you can solve these by yourself, feel free to pause the video and then try them and watch the video and see how you did. So here we go. Number 1, we're going to do a direct translation. This says, what number? It's the very first couple of words in there. It says, what number is 6% of 450? Well, what number kind of sounds like the question, right? This is our unknown. And so in math, whenever we have an unknown, we'll often represent with the letter x, or the variable x. You could use other variables if you want. I'm going to use x. The next word is. And as we talked about a second ago, is often means equals. So x equals 6%. Now I'm going to take that 6% and I'm going to transfer it over to being a decimal. So 6% as a decimal would be 0.06. The word of means multiply, and then we have 450. Okay, so to actually find what x is, we're going to go ahead and use our calculators and evaluate that. So 0.06 times 450 ends up being 27. So that's the answer to the question. What number is 6% of 450? 27 is 6% of 450. Okay, number 2. This one says 53 is 165% of what number? Okay, so I'm going to just start on the left. I'm going to write down 53. The word is means equals. And then I come to my percent. I'm going to want to write that percent as a decimal. So notice how this 165%, this is bigger than 100%. That doesn't change how many places we move the decimal. We are still going to move the decimal 2 places to the left. So it's going to be 1.65. Of course, of means times. What number? That's our variable. So I'm going to use x again. Okay, so this gives us an equation. It's not quite as simple as the one we had there in number 1, but it is very solvable. We want to figure out what that number is. We want to find x, and so we need to get rid of the 1.65. It's 1.65 times x, so we're going to divide by 1.65 in order to isolate the x. We'll divide both sides by 1.65. And 53 divided by 1.65 ends up being, we'll round this one off. We'll say that x is equal to, or approximately equal to, 32.12. I think if you round it off to the hundredths, that's what you get. Okay, let's take a look now at number 3 for our final video example. There we go. There's number 3 right there. Okay, so number 3 says 4 is what percent of 615? Now, I included this in the video because this is a little bit different than the other ones. If you notice, what's missing here is not, like we saw in numbers 1 and 2, some number. What's missing here, the unknown, is going to be our percent. Let's go ahead and translate this just directly. Let's not worry too much about that. I'm going to go ahead and write 4, and then the word is. We're going to pretty much always translate that as equals. What percent? Well, that's my unknown. I'm going to use the letter P to help me remember that it's a percent that I'm trying to find. The word of means to multiply, and then of course 615 is what we are finding the percent of. Okay, so in order to find what P is, we need to get rid of the 615. So similar to the last one we did, we are going to divide both sides by 615. Use your calculators here. 4 divided by 615 is 0.0065 approximately. So P is equal to 0.0065. But if you remember, they wanted a percent. So we need to convert this over to a percent. In order to do that, we're going to take this decimal and we're going to move the decimal 2 places to the right to get to a percent. So it's going to be P equals, if I move this 2 places to the right, I get 0.65, or you could say 0.65%. So that's obviously a very, very small percent. That makes sense because 4 is quite a bit smaller than 615. Okay, so when you come to class, we're going to practice these and then move on and do some applications of these. Hope this has been helpful for you. See you in class.